Previously, the group slowly made their way through the mountains. Rylid used legend lore to find out a lot more about them than the DM intended the group to know at that point in time. He found out that the mountains were full of ley lines, and the entire mountain range was built by the giants to keep whatever was in the Scorched Basin away from the world of men. The first Praetors used sky tears to strip the giants of their powers and murder them, and only one, Kovar Stoneheart, was able to escape. They kept traveling, and that evening Rylid noticed a crack in the stones that led into a large hollow that was warmed by hot springs. It was clearly somewhere that the giants had once used as a place of rest, and the group took advantage of it themselves. As the others settled in to rest for the night, Rylid and Taria went foraging. They came across a plant that grew on ley lines. It would be useful for them, but if they tried to gather it, then it would weaken the ley line there. They decided to leave the plant itself alone, but they did gather some seeds from it. Eventually, everyone took a dip in the hot springs. After a while, a random magpie showed up and started berating the group for being in the water, although Taria had to cast a spell to understand just what it was saying. It was clearly upset they were using the giant's hollow to rest that night. The bird eventually flew away, although Tornak ran after it to try to apologize. He ended up whittling a rough bird that night and leaving it by the pool as an offering. Taria asked Sean if she thought the assassins would come after her in the mountains. Sean was skeptical that they would bother going to that much effort when they could just wait for her to show up somewhere easier for them to access her. Then again, the group had really pissed them off so far. Rylid and Taria set up several alarm spells just in case, but the night passed uneventfully. The next day, they arrived at a plateau covered with the bones of giants. They knew that that was where the massacre by the Praetors had occurred. It was thoroughly desecrated, save for a stone with runes carved in it that had been set up in the very center. Kovar had put it there in remembrance. Tornak quietly started to play a dwarven song of mourning using his drum. It sounded like a heartbeat, and the group noticed several magpies watching them. It was getting late, but the group all agreed that they didn't want to stay somewhere where so much death had happened. They kept traveling, and Sean was able to find another hidden location for them to rest that night. Rylid slipped off to the side for a bit to cast a very carefully worded divination. Tornak followed, to talk to him a little in the aftermath. Around that point in time, Sean glanced upwards and noticed Seraine the assassin perched above them. The group reacted immediately, much to Seraine's amusement, as she revealed that the Twin Silvers were no longer after Sean. Seraine explained that the Twin Silvers had learned just who was pulling the strings behind Avery Rain, and they'd realized that they were actively trying to destroy the world. That wasn't something they were willing to do, so they told Avery Rain that they were ending the contract. Sean was no longer in danger from the Twin Silvers, and they would never take a future contract against her either. The rest of the group was also safe. Apparently, Avery Rain didn't take that well, which led to her head being in a bag that was tossed at Sean's feet. Once the assassin had slipped away into the shadows, Sean cast Speak with Dead upon prompting by Rylid. She asked a few questions and got some vague answers about just who was involved with the various plots going on. The next morning, they set out. Eventually, they reached an area where there were warnings written in giant on every single stone around them. Kovar clearly didn't want visitors. The group kept moving forward, seeing more and more magpies as they walked on. Then they started seeing bodies. Kovar really didn't want visitors. Eventually, they saw a large shape at the top of the mountain. Humanoid, but much larger than any of them. He shouted for the group to leave. Then Taria made herself large. He stared at her for a moment before turning and heading back into the mountain without a word. The group eventually arrived at the crack in the stone that Kovar had disappeared through, and they could see glowing veins pulsing and hear the heartbeat of the mountain. There was no response as Taria led the others inside. She saw handprints inside the cave, ranging from ones that clearly belonged to children to those of adults. There were runes underneath each of them with the names of the giants who lived there. Deep in the mountain, she heard Kovar speak. He thanked the group for awakening his mountain, and he would let them walk away because of it. Their world was doomed, though, as it should be. Rylid planted one of the seeds they picked up previously, the ones that grew over ley lines. He pressed it into the stone, and the mountain's heartbeat suddenly became faster. He suddenly realized that he could infuse it with magic. He put all of his magic into it, every single spell slot he had. The seed suddenly bloomed into a beautiful golden flower that glowed, casting light throughout the entire room. They could see Kovar in the back, crying. He asked Rylid what he'd done, and Rylid told him. The world doesn't have to end. Things can be reborn and things can be fixed even when everything's broken. Kovar knelt down in front of the flower. He told Rylid that 100 years earlier he'd curled up under the mountain and wanted to die. He'd wanted all of the young folk to die because they'd taken everything from him. And now they'd just given his mountain its heart back. He didn't know what to think. And that is where we left off.